Quality public television is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.
Can drivers handle a 75-mile-per-hour speed limit? Can local governments save big money by leasing their public school buildings? And could there be a compromise on fighting beach erosion using human engineering? Those are the questions under debate this week. Hello, I'm Kelly McCullen. Thanks for watching Legislative Week in Review. Question 1, can you, if you drive on North Carolina's interstates safely at 75 miles per hour? That was the question the House debated this week. Legislation would let the DOT raise the speed limit in certain areas to 75. The bill cleared committee to earn full House debate, only the answer this week was a no decision. Interstate highway speeding is technically 1 mile per hour over the posted speed limit, but drivers, including police officers, can sneak above it at times. Some House and Senate members believe it's time to recognize that fact and possibly raise speed limits where they can be safely raised on our interstates and highways. Their legislation would hand that decision to the State Department of Transportation.
This is a DOT decision. It simply authorizes them to allow speeds up to 75 miles an hour on appropriate roads. I mean, it's just an authorization to put it where they want to.
The bill caught the interest of some skeptical lawmakers this week who believe the proposed 75-mile-per-hour limits on certain highways is too high, even if it's only 5 miles faster than current limits. The DOT says the highways can handle that speed. Representative Greer Martin doesn't believe many drivers can handle it.
One weak link in that I remain concerned about, though, is the driver. I don't think that our driver skill level is, I'm not convinced that it's where it needs to be.
Davidson County Republican Representative Rain Brown believes legislators are harming North Carolinians if they vote to pass this bill.
I truly believe that at least one person will die because of this bill that might ordinarily not have died. I cannot see the reason for this. I don't think that even if cars are particularly able to go these kinds of speeds, I just don't think that we're capable.
And there are legislators like Representative Becky Carney. She drives the interstates, and fellow drivers, she says, race right by her. She says she's negative to neutral on a 75-mile-per-hour speed limit on interstates.
I know this is probably going to pass, and people are doing it anyway, but I do believe there is a safety issue.
The bill might raise speed limits, but it would preserve a key speeding cap of 80 miles per hour. If a 75-mile-per-hour speed limit is posted, drivers caught exceeding 80 would be pulled and face possible charges linked to reckless driving. That's a class of penalty greater than your average speeding ticket. The state's formula for determining highway construction projects will be changing. Proposals will soon be judged as having statewide, regional, or divisional importance. Those statewide projects would be approved strictly on data analysis of its need. Regional projects would face a 70% data skew with human feedback receiving 30% consideration, and those divisional or most local projects would be weighed 50-50. Supporters say this plan and new law will remove politics from the equation. Military veterans who operate big rigs in the service could get a big break when they enter the private sector. Veterans who possess military qualifications could receive a commercial driver's license without undergoing state testing. But they could not have lost their driver's license or caused any traffic accidents or held more than one state-issued driver's license at one time. The law will take effect immediately. The Senate is scheduled to vote next week to offer temporary weight exemptions to big rigs serving natural disaster areas. The governor would hold an option to suspend truck weight inspections when the disaster demands that crops be immediately harvested or livestock be moved to a safer location. Truckers, you would be responsible for following the posted weight limits on local bridges. To the education front, the House and Senate will negotiate a bill to warn university students and their families that they'll face tuition surcharges. The UNC system charges students a higher tuition if those students can't earn a bachelor's degree within 140 credit hours. The current bill would count transfer students' credits from community college work while exempting transfer credits from private campuses. The notification system would take effect in fall 2013. We'll let you know about final negotiations. Families of special needs students can qualify for tax credits if they pay taxes and pay for private education. Now, some lawmakers believe those credits should be expanded to families who would qualify if they paid income taxes. During the last budget year, lawmakers created tax credits so disabled children could receive private special education services and their families could receive a special refund. That program has opened the door for an expansion request. The House is on board. The Senate only wants to discuss it for now.
It's already the law that they're entitled to education tax credits up to $3,000 per semester for tuition and special education. And of course, we're talking about for families with children with disabilities. That's already the law.
Current state law helps taxpayers, but not every family that files a state tax return pays into the system. These families of disabled children who are too poor to pay in cannot receive the tax credit under the law. But this legislation would change that. It would allow these families to receive a tax refund to offset those education expenses regardless of income level.
Those who didn't actually have to pay income taxes are now eligible. So that just gives a lot more far reach, especially to those poor and minority families who were not able to take advantage of this now.
Some questions arose over the accountability of private schools. Some senators say these schools could accept private education dollars in essence with no strings attached. But supporters say it's up to the family filing the state income tax return to prove they're investing in qualifying special education courses.
The school doesn't have to provide the daily services, but for the reimbursement to happen, the parents have to prove to the SEAA to get reimbursement that they received daily services.
The current law that allows tax credits for tax-paying families will stand as the Senate discusses a program expansion to cover any family of disabled kids regardless of tax-paying status. The legislation remains in the Senate Education Committee. The Senate began discussing a new way to pay for public school construction. Architects and construction industry lobbyists say they can design and build public schools at huge cost discounts, then lease the buildings back to the school system. Senators say they want to hear more, but wonder if it's too good to be true. There is a political movement supporting a concept known as the Net Zero Energy School. Senate Bill 474 would encourage these campuses for future North Carolina public school systems.
Senate Bill 474 is an innovative way to build public schools.
The legislation would encourage school construction that creates a campus that produces more renewable energy than it consumes.
That is schools that actually have net production back to the grid. And it supports the privatization or leasing of schools, and we'll go over in a minute how that saves money.
But the legislation would shift school construction away from governments building schools to leasing public school campuses built by private companies that would bid on the construction job. One campus in Hoke County is operating under one such lease.
Hoke County would not have built this school but for this concept. They just couldn't afford a new school. They needed a new school. Schools were bursting at the seams, but they couldn't afford one.
Senate Education Committee public testimony provided universal support for private construction of public schools, which other states are allowing.
North Carolina, for many, many years, has had a backlog in school construction, and we believe anything that can save taxpayer dollars, spread those dollars further so that we can get classrooms on the ground faster is beneficial to the state of North Carolina.
Supporters say these net zero energy schools will generate about 30% more electricity than they consume. That would eliminate the monthly power bill and create revenue as schools sell the power back to the electric company. Supporters say the debt used to build these campuses is crafted to make money, and federal tax credits could supply other cash benefits. The private company would own the building and lease it for 28 years, after which the school system could buy it.
Sounds like it's too good to believe. It probably is not believable. So I'm a little worried about this. It sounds great, but I just find it difficult to believe that we can save this much money.
Senate Education Committee Chairman Jerry Tillman says the current bill does not include the price that counties must pay to buy the land on which a school building is constructed.
I don't see the cost of the land in the figures.
The cost of the land?
The cost of the land.
the cost of the land was $300,000.
All right, well.
Senate Bill 474 is only a discussion topic at this point in the legislative cycle, but members of both parties say it's a topic worthy of discussion as schools must stretch every dollar. The House Education Committee stalled legislation that would delay tuberculosis testing for newly hired teachers. The problem is a shortage of TB vaccines. The debate is whether this shortage is limited to only parts of North Carolina. The House Education Committee was asked this week to help newly hired public school teachers by delaying the requirement they receive tuberculosis testing before entering the job.
Department of Health and Human Services have sent a memo out indicating that there is a shortage in supplies required to provide tuberculosis tests.
It's reported that North Carolina does not possess enough TB testing supplies and vaccines in some areas to help newly employed educators comply with state law. That law makes it a criminal offense to enter the classroom without tuberculosis protection. Leanne Winter represents the State School Boards Association. She says Wake County is facing that challenge and they need some help to get teachers on the job.
The main issue is if you go actually to the bill itself, on the second page you will see an existing law. If a teacher did not receive this before being employed, it's actually a misdemeanor offense.
The bill's proposed tuberculosis deferral program would cover every North Carolina county, but the vaccine shortage is apparently sporadic. Some counties can comply with the TB law, others can't. Department of Health and Human Services leaders have told legislative staffers they prefer holding on to the TB vaccine to use only on people showing signs or symptoms of the disease, where new teachers are given doses whether or not they show any warning signs.
Do they predict when these the vaccination might be made available in enough amount so that the teachers can get them?
These are counties in which the Social Service Department notified the superintendent that there is a shortage. So it's not in all of the counties, just those that have a shortage.
Is this shortage local, statewide, nationwide? I have a problem with the entire concept of not testing when it's required.
The bill also does not contain an end date for the TB testing waiver, an omission noted by Democrats and Republicans on the House Education Committee.
It seems like a little bit of a backwards approach. If we're having outbreaks of TB, rather than ignore testing or defer testing, it would seem to me we'd be doing everything within our power to try to find some, to come up with materials to do the testing or something.
Leave an open-ended exemption when there is an outbreak issue strikes me as a not good policy, number one, and number two, a liability problem later on if you're looking at it from a systems point of view.
Those unanswered questions about the status of North Carolina's TB vaccine supplies and the subsequent need to exempt newly hired and symptom-free teachers from vaccinations stall the bill. Committee chair members say they want those questions answered before calling a vote. The House is discussing a taxpayer's Bill of Rights, but is not ready for a committee vote just yet. State spending growth would be limited to the average of population growth plus inflation rate. A two-thirds majority vote would be required to pass budgets exceeding that formula. Supporters say the spending caps would prevent budget crashes when the economy sours. The Taxpayer Act would need a state constitutional amendment change.
Having gotten used to a revenue base that's growing like this, it was hard to get used to one that was flatlined. So the idea behind this bill is to keep that from ever happening again.
The marquee bills of 2013, that being the budget and tax overhaul bills, didn't move much this week. The Senate is weighing final changes to its version of a tax overhaul package and delayed a planned final vote. Over in the House, Speaker Tom Tillis addressed budget bill negotiations on Thursday. He says conference negotiations should pick up early next week and that he's optimistic final votes could come by July 4th. House Democratic Leader Representative Larry Hall is following the budget and the reform, and, well, you heard, next week maybe, week after that, maybe we'll have some movement on tax reform in the budget. What do you think?
Well, we've got a conference committee appointed, so that's a step in the right direction maybe, and without tax reform, I don't think we finalized the budget. Nobody really knows for sure. So tax reform still has to be the leading indicator.
Look at tax reform. The early Senate leading plan was going to be sales taxes, no deductions, very little income tax. Now we're back to more of a flat income tax, no corporate income tax. What's the Democratic response?
Well, again, whenever you say we're going to keep the budget amount that we spend the same, and you're going to change people's responsibilities under it, we're opposed to making poor and working families pay more. And as you said, letting business not pay their fair share. They came here for a reason. It's because of the infrastructure and the education system we have in this state. And they've taken their appropriate profits. It's not as if they're not making their profits. We're still one of the best places in America to do business. So there's no reason that we need to give them amnesty against taxes or not charge them their fair share of taxes.
Republicans say that all income brackets are getting tax relief. Some are getting more than others, but everyone will see a benefit if you pass their income tax plan.
Well, pardon me for laughing, but it is kind of laughable to tell someone that's going from 6.0 percentage bracket down to 5.9, and then you go from 7.75 down to 6.0 or somewhere thereabouts. Obviously, the benefits are disproportionate, and you still have those requirements that you're going to have to pay on goods and services that are going to be increased in those sales taxes. So no state that we know of has increased the standard of living of their population by doing this. The standard of living will go down. It'll cost poor people more to just exist.
What about that zero income tax bracket? $7,500 if you're single, double that if you're married filing jointly. You can work state tax free, but you can't make a whole lot of money though.
Right. You can be absolutely poor and you don't have to pay taxes, which that is the case now. That's really no benefit. If you look at inflation and the increased cost of just surviving in our society, that's really no progress. And to equate that with the tax breaks that have been given to corporations and to the higher earning millionaires in their tax plan, still not even close.
Looking forward to the budget, tax reform aside, it's about $20 billion. The budget does grow up to near $21 billion if a final compromise holds to those numbers 2 years from now. What do you make of that? There's an argument that government's getting cut, yet government is growing on the bottom line. If you're an ordinary Joe out there, how do you interpret that?
Well, I guess the ordinary Joe out there would say, I have 9 children and I have a budget amount that I paid for 9 children. I had a 10th child. I've increased my household by 10%. And it's not reasonable for me to think my grocery budget's not going to increase or my other expenditures for living aren't going to increase. They are going to increase. The state has increased in size. We're gaining population every year, and the cost of running the state and providing services increases.
As a leader of the caucus of the Democrats there in the House, has what's happened in 2013 helped the Democrats or hurt the Democrats heading into the off-year election and into 2016?
Well, I guess the viewpoint would not be did it hurt us. Has it hurt North Carolina, and have people now seen what reality is versus campaign rhetoric? And I think the people have seen, and they'll be willing to make a change and do something different.
Representative Larry Hall, thank you.
Thank you.
North Carolina voters will receive on-the-ballot information when asked to approve bonds. Bond ballots will include information on the dollar cost of the bond, including the interest that will be paid. Each bond proposal would carry a warning or notification that local taxes could be or will be raised to pay off the bond debt. The House and Senate agree on streamlining regulations restricting cell phone tower construction. Cities that receive tower permit applications could not deny that request because the town doesn't need another tower. Only public safety, land development, and zoning concerns could be reviewed by local authorities. Private companies would not be required to give city officials any information the company deems proprietary. The U.S. military will receive a say over private development in cities neighboring North Carolina-based military bases. Proposed building construction that tops 200 feet would need Building Code Council endorsement as well as the approval of nearby base commanders. Buildings in historic districts would be exempt, and existing buildings would be grandfathered unless they undergo renovations that change their height. The law is designed to prevent interference with military airspace and is backed by $5,000 daily fines for violators. The House is considering Senate legislation that could lift the ban on erosion-fighting jetties along North Carolina's coastline, or at least restrict them. They're called terminal groins, and they influence the otherwise natural movement of sand along our coast. Coastal County House Republicans presented legislation this week that would allow local governments to fight beach erosion using man-made structures. The Senate passed this bill allowing what's called terminal groins. These are structures that can stick out in the water and allow human beings to influence what would be otherwise natural sand shifts up and down the coast. But these House Republicans say their proposal is different.
We actually have amended the definition of terminal groin. And the purpose of this is to truly restrict the definition of terminal groin to the types of terminal groins that we want to see present here in North Carolina.
Environmentally conscious legislators worry the human interference would allow the protection of some private property at the expense of other properties that would not be threatened by natural sand migration. But Representative Rick Catlin says this House bill would not allow for sand steering structures, only protective barriers to ensure that inlets stay open at specific locations, the ends of islands.
They hold sand in place on the beach to stop erosion. They do not stop sand from moving down gradient. So it's important to understand those differences.
It appears to me we're expanding the definition of terminal groin now so that it could actually include groin fields, because it looks like it could be a number of structures at the end of the island. Am I interpreting that inaccurately?
It has to be at the terminus of the island. It has to be beside the inlet. I mean, that goes with the name. And by the way, if I could change the name of terminal groin, I would. But that's the Corps of Engineers term. So no, it does not allow groin fields at all.
Brunswick County Representative Frank Eiler says this House compromise legislation may finally solve a long-running debate between the state and beach town leaders who've said for years their inlets are clogged, shrinking, and that they needed help.
We fought this fight for several years, and I think it's just a great step forward, and it makes it from going to impossible to have a terminal groin to maybe possible. So thank you very much.
The focus is on terminal groin construction in Senate Bill 151, but this legislation carries other provisions. It would allow local law enforcement officers to enforce local ordinances on state-owned public trust areas, and it reinforces the state guarantee that marine and wildlife resources belong to all the people of North Carolina. The House and Senate endorse a pathway for homebound residents to receive photo identification. A resident would need a doctor's confirmation that they live with a severe disability that prevents travel. These IDs would look like standard driver's licenses, but the DMV is instructed by law to craft all the rules. First Lady Ann McCrory and State Representative Jason Sain pressure the Senate to pass their anti-puppy mill legislation. House Bill 930 would demand certain dog breeders supply fresh food, water, exercise, health care, and clean cages to their dogs. The law would not apply to kennels, businesses not focused on selling puppies, and breeders who breed for hunting, sport, or field trial purposes.
So many of our surrounding states, West Virginia, Virginia, and Tennessee, have already passed commercial puppy mill breeding laws, and that makes us, as we turn into suddenly the safe haven for puppy mill breeders.
The House is weighing Senate legislation giving criminal defendants a choice in who determines their guilt or innocence. Senate Bill 399 would let defendants waive a jury trial in favor of having a judge determine the verdict. The state constitution would need amending because every defendant is guaranteed a jury trial in North Carolina, but this waiver would not apply to capital murder cases. Former North Carolina Governor Jim Holshouser was remembered this week in Southern Pines. He was the first elected Republican governor in the 20th century after serving as a legislator and state Republican Party chairman. Former Governor Holshouser was 78.
I love Jim Holshouser. He and I campaigned together for some candidates, and we spent a lot of time together. He was funny. He was wise. He had a lot of good stories, and he had great experience.
He really worked hard to get Democrats into his camp, and he was able to do that. Typical of that is that former Governor Jim Hunt partnered with him to form the Hunt-Holshouser group that still functions today, and that many of us still admire the way that they really establish bipartisanship in the state, and that's very commendable.
The Senate voted unanimously this week to honor the late former Senator Don East. Mr. East died in December 2012 following back surgery. He served the North Carolina Senate from 1995 to 2000. He returned in 2005 to serve until 2012.
Senator Don East was a proud public servant, serving with the Winston-Salem Police Department, the Surrey County Board of Commissioners, and the North Carolina General Assembly. He was devoted to his constituents, his community, and to the state of North Carolina.
The Senate is also remembering the service of former state Senator Jean Preston. Miss Preston died in early 2013 after falling while on vacation. Senators of both parties shared their memories.
It didn't matter what parties we were from. We had similar concerns about education and about the welfare of people. And oftentimes, as we discussed bills going in, she and I would sit back and we'd chat about what it ought to be and what ought to happen and the good of kids in our education system. So I had very fond memories of Jean Preston.
The term lady was definitely Jean Preston. You know, she was as genuine as they come. I mean, you just couldn't find any more genuine than Jean.
Find us online this weekend on Facebook, facebook.com/legweek. If you're on Twitter, find us at Leg Week in Review and send your comments directly to our team. The email address is legweek@unctv.org. That's our show for this week. Thank you so much, as always, for watching.
Quality public television is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.